Hello and welcome to this week's episode. And today I'm so excited to chat to Colette because we're very much on the same wavelength. Even today we are both wearing animal prints. Just to put this into pictures, we talk about stories. But yet, well, I've just said there what we are talking about. Now, Colette is all about stories. And you know what? I'm going to hand it to you. Just tell us a bit more about your journey and your why and just what it is you do.
Yeah. So I was writing a bio about a year and a half ago for LinkedIn, and I was like, oh my God, I have literally been telling stories my whole career, probably my whole life when I was making stuff up as a kid. But I wanted to write books originally. But I didn't know anyone who'd written novels. I didn't know how that was how you could make a living. So I got into journalism, and then I found that I actually really like talking on camera, which is what most people don't like doing, but I love it.
Yeah.
And what became apparent really quickly to me was that some people talk in a really engaging way, and they can make their message real and vivid and relatable. And they were the people, you know, whether I was working on radio, I was working on the news desk, or as a correspondent, they were the people that we'd always pick up the phone to and go, oh, can you come on? You know, can you do this? So they were really growing their influence all the time. And then the other people who you'd interview, and, you know, they'd kind of like, it just wasn't quite clear. And what I found myself saying, which probably I shouldn't, is this what you mean? And they were like, oh yes, that's exactly what I mean. So that was really clear to me, that actually when you tell stories, because the people who were making their message really clear were telling stories, you know, they're the ones who kind of get all the power, get all the influence, and make the impact. And then I did go off, actually. I left the BBC and I went off to write psychological thrillers. So I have spent,
Really?
yeah, yeah, I have spent a good 6-7 years sitting in my study doing really horrible things to people in my books.
Yeah.
And I've also taught creative writing, and, you know, really kind of delved into structure and pace and story, like storytelling. And from that, what I realized was that, you know, I was really missing something. Like, yes, I love writing novels, and I still do. But what I loved was actually going out there and helping people tell their stories in a really compelling way. So I guess what I do now as a story coach and a story strategist is kind of like a marriage. It's the sweet spot between, you know, what I've done in the past.
Yeah, I love that, because I suppose if you just kept that to yourself, that skill set, that passion, it'd be a bit of waste, wouldn't it? You know, if that's your passion, you think, actually, I can share this gift. That's the word I was looking for, gift, rather than skills. It's a bit corporate there, but you know, that's something actually I wanted to pick up on, was the word strategy. So I talk about what sounds a little bit corporate, and that's really intrigued me, because with strategy, I don't know, when we hear a story, it just flows, doesn't it? I think we almost forget. And is that part of the craft, would you say, that it doesn't sound like there's any strategy to it? It sounds natural. What would you say?
Yeah, well, you know, it's like you make something look easy because you don't want people to see the kind of connection points, but actually you've worked quite hard to craft it. And strategy for me really means that you know what direction you're going in. And so that is really true to messaging as well, you know, or, you know, how you show up for people online or on screen or whatever. And so with story, it's like a brilliant strategy tool. I mean, I call it, you know, a precision method of communication, because what you do before you tell a story in business, and this is very different to how you tell a story when you're down the pub or in a bar, or, you know, just meeting up with your friends, what you should always do in business before you tell a story is work out who you're talking to. And I know that sounds really obvious, but like, we don't always do it, do we?
No.
Once you know who you're talking to, you can work backwards and ask yourself, what message do you want to share with them? And also, what action do you want them to take as a result of that message?
Ooh.
So it is really, really streamlined. And also, what a story does, because of the structure that I use and the method that I've got, is it's like a funnel, right? So you kind of chuck out all the sort of stuff that is not important, and the stuff that will kind of, you know, take your audience on a detour. And it's about getting from A to B to C in the most effective and enjoyable way for me.
Yeah, because that's it, isn't it? You hear the word strategy and you don't really think of it as being this enjoyable experience or process. But I mean, is there a big difference from when you've written your novels to now becoming more to do connected with brands and businesses, would you say? Or do you still Do you still delve in the novels as well a little bit? But, you know, what is the big difference?
Well, for starters, I'm not telling people to make stuff up, so that's the big difference.
Yeah.
So and actually, there is, and I struggle with the word storytelling sometimes, because in the corporate world people are like, I don't need storytelling, and I'm like, no, seriously, you do. But actually, storytelling is just a method of like high impact communication. It's a tool. And people go, well, my clients don't want stories, and I'm like, oh, do your clients ever read a novel, or would they just rather have the book, in all different parts? Or do they watch, a show, a TV show? Or would they have rather just kind of got all the pieces that might have been on the cutting room floor and kind of tried to find the golden thread and the narrative in that? I'm like, of course they want stories. It's like the way we process information, but there is a sort of myth around storytelling that it is about making stuff up. And that's why I always make the distinction between the stories that we tell for business, the strategic stories, and the other stories that, we kind of like I would create in my, other life, which is, fiction.
Yeah, I mean, what makes a good story? Let's go back a little step here, because like I said, there might be a little bit blocks around that. You've already said there, in corporate world, they're thinking, yeah, we don't need stories. That's just made up stuff that we want to be kind of very much about the facts, probably more than anything. But yeah, first of all, why would you say people need them, especially in their brand? And what makes a good story?
Well, stories are all about connection, and actually we all need connection, don't we? And one of the things, so either people tend to fall into two camps. So they either say, I don't really need stories, my clients don't want stories. As I've already explained, I think that is nonsense, but
Yeah.
or they say, oh no, I'm a really good storyteller. And what you find is, when you kind of, you start to work with them, is that they don't really know what a story is. And I don't mean that, like, I don't want to come across as like, oh, you don't know what a story is, but actually there's a fundamental structure to a story. And you're really right, and it's a great question, because you're right in saying a story needs certain components to make it a story. Okay, so it has, and I sound like a broken record sometimes when I talk about this. I'm like, could you be more specific? Could you be more specific? And it is about being specific. So it's about pinpointing a specific moment in time when what you're going to say became apparent to you. It also has to have a character, and the character could be you, it could be a client. I tell stories of people that I've never met, but actually I've learned a lesson from them. But it is never your product or your program. And I do understand that, like, you've poured all this effort and time into like this subscription box you have, but like the subscription box and the kind of tins of pulses, or the amazing like marrows that you're putting in your subscription box, they are not the character, right? They cannot be the character.
That could be a good story.
Yeah, well, it would be. Maybe we could make that story up. It also has to have detail. And again, people get confused by this, because they're like, you've just told me to be really specific and to be kind of streamlined, and now you're asking me to put a lot of detail in. I never ask people to put a lot of detail in. I ask them to think about key details that will bring their story to life for the listener or the audience. And then the last one, but probably the most important one, well, I don't know, they're all important. Your story has to have an insight, okay? It doesn't run along a straight line. It has to have, so you start off thinking one thing, and then something happens, and then there comes an insight. And it is that insight that you're sharing with your audience to pass on some knowledge, to allow them to take a shortcut, to allow them to leap over some problems that you might have experienced in business. And you're saying, here, you don't have to do that, because I'm here to show you what you can do.
Yeah, love that. I mean, we get so focused on, I'm just backtracking a little bit here about the product side of things, then we'll kind of come to that step as well. But what I loved there, what I did pick up from that, was about the fact that, say we're telling a story, we are getting the details out there, but we do want to put the products in, don't we? And do you think that's where a lot of people just do get it wrong, that they think it's all about selling? But actually, by the sound of things, and from my own experience, stories do sell, don't they? Not in an obvious way of, here's my book and buy my book, but they sell without you knowing, don't they? I'm all about, I call it soulful selling, and not feeling salesy. But would you say that it's just a huge tool by the sounds of it for selling?
It absolutely is. And like, I'm not a salesperson. Like I was a journalist and then a novelist. And so, but actually, even as a journalist, you're kind of selling something because you want people to talk to you. Stories sell the benefits of your product
Yes.
without selling the features and functions. So I have a corporate course and we show this video and I'm like, what point do you think, and the videos of Steve Jobs launching the iCloud, and I'm like, what point do you think he gets his sell-in for this? And the point at which he gets his sell-in is the point at which he makes people understand that he knows there's an issue, that he understands their problem. And the thing about the story structure is, if you're telling a story and you've pinpointed a problem, your story brain immediately goes, well, if you pinpointed that problem, I know you're going to give me the solution, right? So people are tuned in.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, it doesn't matter what you've got. Like, you've identified my problem. You understand me. I want your solution.
Take my money.
Exactly. I mean, like, I just bought a course, because I'm not great at technical stuff and whatever. And I just bought a course and like got my credit card out or my card out. And like, I know we're all taught to write these sales pages, but like, I don't need to know what's in that course. I need to know what problem it's going to solve for me. So it's always about the gap. Okay. So a story shows how your product fills the gap, but it doesn't have to tell you or tell your audience what features and functions and how your product does that. And yes, that comes a point. I'm not saying like we don't give people any information, but it's not the most important part. It's not really what sells.
No, I'm forever saying this. We are so on the same wavelength here. So where you're saying story, I would probably say brand message, but I guess for you, the message runs through the story. So it's so connected. But I'm constantly saying, in a way, we are quite simple creatures, I guess. Not me and you personally, I don't think.
Oh no, I am.
Yeah, actually me too. So yeah. But it's more that in a way we're not bothered about the process, are we? You can say, I have this amazing course, it's all singing, all dancing, look at all the features, I give you this extra, and people are literally selling that product. But actually, just tell me what it does, isn't it, really? And I suppose stories, as you say, are weaving that through without it even being as obvious as this is what this product does.
Yeah. It's like when you when you walk into a house, so you're like viewing a house and you kind of almost make up your mind like in the first couple of minutes, don't you? And you're like, oh my goodness, the garden, and you can begin to imagine, maybe your children or children that you might want to have or whatever, like your dog. You imagine, Peggy, your cockapoo, running in the garden. You're like, this is the house for me. And then, you get the survey and it's like, yeah, but the roof's falling down and you'll need to do this and this and this. And you're like, I don't care. That's the house for me. I want that house. And that's what I mean by you kind of sell the benefit. You create a feeling.
Yes. Emotions.
That is so important in the story. You create a feeling.
Well, again, as humans, that's all we really crave, isn't it? That emotional connection, and talk to us in emotional form, and we are there. But talk again, I love that analogy actually about walking into the house, and that even if then somebody turned around and said, well, this has this, look at this light socket, and look at this, and the underfloor heating, like I said, well, probably that's a little bit different actually, because that sounds quite nice. But if it was, here we go, the bare structure, we just wouldn't be interested, would we? No. So I love what you've said there about painting that. I see you even painted a picture and a story in a podcast.
Yeah, well, the only way that you can actually sell storytelling is by selling. So, and it's so counterintuitive because stories are all about showing and not telling. And so, when, and I've had this several times and, trying to write copy, particularly for the corporate course that I created. And it's like, oh, stories will make you, a better communicator. They'll make you inspire your audience. And I'm like, oh, I am like doing exactly what I'm telling people not to do. So you've always got to come back and go, well, show me, don't tell me.
Ah, yeah, that's interesting. And yeah, and something you started to touch on a few sort of chats ago, and I can't remember what it was, so I'm just going to pluck this out of thin air, but I was thinking about something you mentioned, and I'll have to rewind it after to check, but it's about being vulnerable and how much we share. And that's something that do you know what, even myself, I think there's sort of things that I hold back from. That was it. It's come back to me, Colette. So it was about the insight, sharing the insight, because you're quite hot on this. I know we've chatted prior to this about limiting beliefs and how much you share as such. I've even seen one of your posts about oversharing. So this is something I'm really hot to chat about. So being vulnerable, how much you share, and if it has got an insight, does that kind of fix it? You know, if people are feeling a bit icky around sharing and thinking, do people want to know this? As long as it links, does that make it compelling, would you say?
I think it's about being real, you know. I mean, maybe vulnerability is like an overused word, and people feel like they've got to show up when they're actually still in pain. And I'm not really sure what the benefit of that is. And so the whole point about stories, and this is why I'm like, you know, I get maybe a little bit kind of purist about them,
Mm.
because I think stories has become this catch-all term for, you know, anything that's supposed to be compelling content, and it isn't. You know, like if you really understand stories, they are so powerful and liberating. So going back to the point about vulnerability, it's like, you know, what, and this again is like, stories are an audience-based form of communication. So you think of your audience first. So if you showing up incredibly vulnerable and in pain, and, you know, say I came on here today and I'm crying my eyes out and I'm like, Carly, like, you know, I am going through, and I started telling you a story about maybe a divorce that a divorce. I'm not going through a divorce, by the way, but like if I was, and you know, I'm breaking down, and that is me being vulnerable. But what benefit has that got for my audience? So when you start from the point of your audience, and then you kind of realize that a story always has to have an insight, then you get to the point of going, okay, well, it's not just about being vulnerable, but it's showing who you are and admitting to maybe past failures. And I don't really think of them as failures, but, you know, times when things haven't gone according to plan, but showing your audience how you got through it and sharing the insight. Yeah, and that's why I always say to people, you know, you share the scar, not the scab. So you share it when you are over it, and then it, you know, it doesn't feel so exposing because you've taken the learning from it, you've moved past it. You know, I'll give you an example. Like I could go on today to Instagram or wherever and talk about something that was really painful for me last year. I don't feel like I want to yet. And that doesn't make me inauthentic. It just means that I am getting to the point where I will share it soon, but I'm not there yet. And I have to be there, and I have to be comfortable with it.
Yeah, that's Joe, that's such key advice for anybody listening, because I think there's a lot of pressure out there, isn't there, on social media. You see these vulnerable posts, as we sort of like to say, it probably is a word that is thrown around quite a lot. So let's say authentic, even though that becomes a buzzword, doesn't it, as well? But you know, they're thinking, how vulnerable should I be? And almost getting that driven into them that actually, yes, share, share, share. But I think what you said there is key, that you have to be ready, don't you? And I agree with you. I think you have to almost be a step ahead from that. And that's the only way you'll get the insight, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's another key point that you just picked up on there. If you want to establish yourself as a kind of, you know, leader in your field and the expert, people look to you for advice, okay? If you are still in what I would call the messy middle, and you're kind of figuring it out, and it's really like, you know, you can't see the wood for the trees, you have no advice to offer.
Yeah.
You know? And so, yes, you know, maybe it's comforting to some people going, oh, well, I'm not alone. But you're not setting yourself up as the leader or the expert or somebody who, you know, your audience turns to for advice. And that, you know, again, this is the key thing. Like, there is a distinction between the stories we tell for business and the stories we just tell to our friends, or, you know, in any other way.
Yeah, because we have to be the leader, don't we? I think, like you say, if there's that almost comforting support that, yeah, they're going through this as well, but they're not going to come to you, they would straight away think, well, that person can't help me because they're going through it as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, let's go back to the word authentic that I used there as well. I did mention that becomes a bit of a buzzword. I know you mentioned it before. I mean, I love authenticity. I said it. I can never say that word. But you know, I mean, this is something that I like to chat about, because it kind of links to what we said about being vulnerable. And do you find this a lot, that people are thinking who they should be as opposed to who they are? And do you think, even though they could say authentic, you know, what's it take to really step into that authenticity?
I think it takes courage.
Mm.
So, my method of teaching is, because of my background and because of what I said, you know, I was on air every day, I was doing lives for the BBC, and like, you know, I say I enjoy them, I didn't enjoy them at first. And what I found was that, you know, when I first got my first, you know, my gig as a kind of BBC television reporter, I looked around at what everybody else was doing and I thought, I have to be like them in order to be successful. And I kind of, you know, I had much more of a Geordie accent, for instance. I got rid of my Geordie accent.
Are you
You
a
know,
Geordie? I did
well,
not pick
I
that
grew
up.
up there. I'm actually Scottish, but yeah. And so, and there I was, like being this little kind of cookie cutter reporter. And what I found was, like, I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't feeling the stories that I was telling. I was saying words and trying to be somebody else. And you know, I wasn't very good at it. And what happened was I had a terrible moment where I had kind of, you know, I was in the middle of a live, it all went completely tits up.
Oh no.
And, you know, like I really wanted the world, the ground to...
You need to tell us this now, Colette. We need to know what happened.
well, I was just kind of starting out, and you know, they'd thrown too much at me, and I think it was like a festival that I was doing, and I was interviewing a comedian who's on TV. I can't remember his name actually, but he's quite famous. And anyway, I just like, one, I wasn't up to it because I didn't have enough experience, but two, I was still like, I wasn't myself.
Back to that.
And I felt like I had to be this kind of perfect version of whatever a TV reporter was. Anyway, the whole thing was a disaster. And I went away thinking, like, you know, I just remember holding a piece of paper, and the paper was shaking, and I had the microphone in the other hand, and I thought, he must think I'm just the word, like, you know, so inexperienced.
Bless you.
And so I came away and I just thought, I can't do this. Like, I can't be like this. You know, because the thing you've got to understand is stuff goes wrong, okay? So you have to, like, you know, if you're kind of clinging to that notion of perfection, things go wrong. So anyway, I went away and I was like, it's either like I ditch the job or, you know, I find a different way to do it. And then I started kind of really paying attention to what people were saying and listening and kind of really feeling the stories. And instead of just turning up and saying words in a kind of perfect way, which wasn't perfect at all, I started to tell stories and I started to be myself. And that is the point that I really began to enjoy being live. Because and you know, people and bosses and work would go, oh, that was amazing, you know, and I was like on air every day for another big story, and they were like, that is, you know, you are doing brilliantly. Nobody was saying that before when I was trying to be someone else.
Wow,
so
that's telling.
It is, isn't it? And here we are, like, you know, and I know people do courses to be better presenters or whatever, and you know, you'll be taught like, oh, well, use a hand motion at this point, and you know, speak like this, and introduce yourself like this. And for me, like, you will never hear me say that, because my thing is, like, when you really connect to what gets you excited, you will show that enthusiasm, okay? I mean, like, for instance, next time you're really excited or surprised or like giddy with joy, try putting your hands behind your back, okay? Try talking in a really low-key voice, that, you know, really down there voice. You can't do it. So it's like, when you're there, when you've tapped into your stories and you know how to use them to connect with your audience, it is almost impossible to show up and not kind of bring that energy to the party.
Definitely. You know, I'm nodding along because I think that when people are, I constantly talk about being in alignment. And again, it sounds like a bit of a buzzword. Like I say, authentic, I can't say the word now, authentic, but being in alignment. And that seems like it just fits for everything that you've just spoken about as well, because that passion comes through. And it made me chuckle then. You were saying about people saying that, you know, to use this hand gesture and to say the certain thing. If that was me, you can just imagine how that would come across. You'd be so busy thinking of that, wouldn't you? It just wouldn't come across as authentic anyway.
No. And like, I'm not knocking it, you know, some people, even like when you've got all your stories nailed and whatever, but you know, some people might still need help with the camera work, and you know, I help people with that as well. But most people come to me and say, I don't know what to share, I don't know how my stories connect with my message, I don't know how to use them in my business. Once you've figured all that out, and you know, like, you know, you're not going to show up perfect at the beginning, and that's fine, right? Because, you know, talking on camera isn't the most natural thing. But when you really believe in what you're saying, you're like 50% there.
Yeah, and Joe, it's funny, we was chatting about stories, and even people listening might think of this. You start to think of the written word, but you can start to put this into videos and lives as well, can't you? So once you've got that strategy and that energy alignment, your message, that can just go across it. Do you think that comes into it? We're going to chat about mindset, about different stories in a second. And, you know, people that have got the real fear of going live, of doing videos, I come across this so much. Would this help them?
Oh, I mean, that's what I do. Yeah, absolutely. It's like my method is, get really clear on your stories. Once you're clear on your message and your stories, and you know how to present it in a way that will connect with people, then the courage, it's much easier to find the courage to show up on camera or, stage when eventually that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only through being courageous that you will get the confidence. Like, confidence is totally overrated. Nobody has a confidence at first. Like when I was doing those lives for the BBC, was I confident? No, I was absolutely crapping myself, like I wasn't confident. It's only by doing it again and again and again that you get confident. So yes, absolutely. And the funny thing is, like, I set up a Facebook group a couple of months ago, or a month and a half ago, and everybody comes in and I encourage people to do lives, and they all come on and go, oh, this is my first live, I'm really terrified. I swear to God, everybody who comes on is so engaging and, like so warm and real and just like themselves. It's the resistance to going on camera is all to do with you. It is never about anyone else. It's never really about how you actually are. It's how you perceive yourself to be.
Oh, 100%. Well, that links me perfectly to the next thing I wanted to chat about, was that fear of judgment. I mean, only a couple of episodes actually, I spoke to a business coach, and he was all about getting past the fear of what other people think. But this is going to show up in this as well, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, and limiting stories are a big one that, I work on. And we all have them, and we all come across them every day. In fact, I was talking to a client yesterday, and she was just saying, like, actually putting offers out there is quite kind of scary sometimes. And I said, so a lot of people come to me, and particularly women, and they're like, okay, I want to kind of transition into, I'm moving away from the corporate space or whatever, but I'm worried about what my colleagues are going to think of me. And I'm like, okay, why? And then it occurred to me that I was worried too. So like there I was, going live on the 6 o'clock news or the 1 o'clock news for years. And about 2 years ago, could I go live on Instagram to my, at the time, 500 followers on my author account? No, because I
Really?
was
How crazy is that?
it's just nuts.
Oh.
And then when it came to actually, like setting the storytelling side of things up for me, I could do it for another company. I could do it for my corporate calls. When it came to me talking about it, did I feel comfortable doing that? Absolutely not. What was I worried about? I was worried about my old colleagues, most of whom I haven't seen since 2012, thinking, oh, well, who's she to do that? And the other limiting story that came up was, oh, they'll think that my books haven't been successful, so I need to do this. And I'm kind of, I'm, that awful word, pivoting to something else. And it's like, no, I can be interested in more than one thing. So it's just like all these stories that hold us back. It's always like here with us. It's not about anyone else.
Oh, totally. As you're saying that, I can think of examples that, I've made a big transition this year, and the same thing, you start to kind of question yourself. And something I was really interested in there that I've noticed myself is that I can go into my, say, Facebook group, do a live, but do you know what, I'm going to confess here, I rarely go live on my Facebook page, and that's because there's friends and family on there.
Yeah.
And and that's got me into a bit of trouble. People pick up on things and maybe misjudge things. It's funny, isn't it, that how is it possible that we can go for yourself, it'll be into millions, I'm guessing, will it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could do that, but then as soon as it became personal, that's where
Yeah.
the fear came in, would you say?
Do you know what? You totally hit the nail on the head, because we can do so. I don't know what, if you had a corporate job before or whatever, but a lot of people will stand up and they'll present, because it's somebody else's message. They'll present for a client, they'll pitch for a client because it's their thing. When it's your thing, all that is like totally exposing, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just like, that's just, it feels like somebody's kind of, peeled your skin off. It's just really vulnerable. And that's what I'm all about, helping women to kind of get past that, that sort of, get over that bridge and go, no, all your stories point to the fact that you have value. You know, you are you're not the best person to share this message. You are the only person. You
Ooh, I
know,
like
when you're
that.
telling your stories, you are the only person who can tell this story. And it really brings a lot of confidence and clarity.
Yeah, I was going to say, is the one actionable tip that you can give, is that the top one, would you say, or is there anything else that comes up?
Oh, one actionable tip. I mean, God, I could give loads, but like, well, when it comes to the camera, right, just do, I know this is like, it's not even a tip, but just do it, you know, just do
Love
it.
it.
But the other thing that, and I encourage my group as well, is speak, you know, if even if you're at the beginning of your business journey, like I ask people to come on and talk about it as if it's real. Okay, because what I know is that when you, like, if it's all just kind of trapped in your head, it doesn't feel real. Like, you've got to find a way of getting it out there. So beginning to talk about it and maybe getting a reaction from other people, a positive reaction, or someone saying,
Mm.
oh my goodness, that's, you know, that's just what I need right now. It creates its own energy, doesn't it? And I know this from my writing. So like, I'm a you know, when I say an amazing plotter, I don't mean I'm an amazing plotter. What I mean is that I can just spend like a year plotting a book and not actually writing a single word. And I can plot it out. I can plot every scene. It's only when I start writing the book that actually it becomes clear to me where I'm going and who the characters are. It's the doing, okay,
Yes.
you know? So whatever it is, like, it's stop thinking and do. Speak about it as if it's real. You know, nobody's gonna, like, yeah, maybe if you kind of go out there on Instagram, but like in certain groups, like in my group, I'm like, you can do it. You have the permission here to make it real by kind of speaking it into reality.
Yeah, it's just take action, isn't it? Those words probably get overused a little bit, but it's at the end of the day, it's just start, isn't it? Just
Yeah.
do, which I know is not easy. We go back to the mindset blocks, but just do it.
Yeah. And that other thing about perfection, and you know what, like, nobody wants perfection. You know, nobody wants, like, why are we trying to achieve perfection? Because I don't know about you, but like, I find perfection really intimidating. You
Yeah.
know, like, when I've
Yeah.
got a friend, and whenever I go into a house, it's like super clean. Like, you know, we amongst our friends, we're like, okay, let's find the speck of dirt, you know, find the
Love
speck
it.
of dirt. Nobody's ever found a speck of dirt in her house, right? I don't know how she does it, but like, it's so, you know, when she comes to visit my house, I'm like on alert, right? The house has got to be really clean, really clean. Now, I love
Yeah.
my friend dearly, but like, I don't need that level of perfection in my life, because I
Mm.
can't reach it. It's, for me, it's not
Yes.
achievable. Okay. So like, just be real, you know, when you, like, even I say to people, it doesn't matter if you kind of go on camera and you have to look down at your notes, that's okay, right?
Yeah.
It's okay. Because actually what it does is make other people think, oh, that's okay, then I can do it. And you're kind of like,
Yes.
you know, putting this energy out there that other people pick up on, and you're creating impact.
Yeah, it's just being real, isn't it? And being human, I guess. And I find that, that I will do that. If I'm on a live, I'm doing a group program at the moment, and I chat and I'll say, I've got my notes here. I'm
Yeah.
going to refer to them because then I know what I'm saying to you. And I think, like you say, I think it is interesting, the permission that we need sometimes to do it. And I think definitely we can be role models that help them to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And by, you know, ditching that sort of ridiculous perfectionism that, you know, we see.
It
And no,
doesn't even
like, nobody
exist.
wants that perfect friend, do they? You sort of like, oh, there's got to be. I mean, I
Find
also
the
get
flaw.
something suspicious about somebody who's really perfect. I'm like, okay, what's she hiding?
Yeah, yeah, that's the point. Do we even trust if it's perfect? Because nothing, I've just done actually one of my I don't know when this will air. It was episode, let me think, 25 about perfectionism, and I say exactly that it's not achievable, but also say nobody actually wants it, do they? Does it even exist?
No, no, not at all. And actually, for me, you know, coming from a kind of news background where, you know, you do have to, like, I was a political correspondent, and you can't really get your facts wrong because, you know, you've got the
Ooh.
government kind of coming down on the
Yeah,
BBC. So like, there are times when you need to be perfect, but letting go of that and sort of putting stuff out there that isn't edited to an, you know, the nth degree, or, you know, doing a video. Like, my husband's like, oh, I'm not sure about the lighting. I'm like, it's going out there, I don't care, you know.
yeah,
It's not that I don't care, it's just that, like, I'd rather do 3 videos that are imperfect than, you know, kind of
exactly.
spend 5 weeks doing one.
Yeah, just get it out there, isn't it? Holding ourselves back and procrastinating, and it just becomes another form, doesn't it, of that, prolongs the fear of judgment, I guess.
Yeah.
Wow. We've covered so much there, and that is really going to help people listening. But there's something I'd like to chat about is, I'm all about brand and brand message. And let's see, how can stories start to go into that?
So one of the things that I think people often overlook when, we're talking about messaging and your personal brand is what you do. Now, I know that sounds kind of like, what was she talking about? We talk about like getting, crafting this amazing copy or going on camera and spreading your message. But the other side of storytelling is how you can trigger stories around your brand. So one example that came up for me recently was Denise Duffield Thomas, who, I don't know whether you saw it, but she put out that newsletter to say, I'm drawing a line in the sand. I don't need anybody who's paid for my programs. You don't own me. It was all around the American election.
I did see it, yes.
Yeah.
I thought it was very brave.
It was very brave, but it is like, okay, so people know her. She has taken action on that. And I have another little story that I'll just share with you about how we can kind of take little actions that, and they'll create these stories, by which I mean like the stories that other people share about us. So it was during lockdown, and my kids were like fed up with being at school, and we're all fed up with the homeschooling and they're missing their friends. Anyway, my husband opens the door one day and there is a shoebox sitting on the doorstep, and he's like, have you ordered any shoes? I'm like, no, not that I know of. Anyway, he opens the shoebox and he lets out this scream. Now, he's not a scream, he doesn't really
I'm intrigued now.
Yeah. And then the kids come running downstairs and I can't get near them, and the kids are like, oh my goodness, and they're like literally jumping up and down for joy. Now, a few days before, my 12-year-old had gone round the corner and had posted a little note through a door, and it happens to be the door where a Premier League footballer lives. Ooh. And he had done that the year previous with another footballer who lived there, because they rent the house out, and just said, my name's Milo, I really support the club, and would you like to play FIFA with me or something? It looked like he's never going to play FIFA with him. Anyway, this shoebox was from the footballer with a pair of his personalized boots and a little note saying, hi Milo, thanks for getting in touch with me. I hope you like the gift. Wow. Right now, okay, you don't expect that from a Premier League footballer, okay? And it is surprising. It made my kid's day. It was a small act, which, it was a really kind act, but he didn't have to do it. And so that's what I mean about like, what actions do we take to create our brand? Okay, because we can, like, words are one thing actually, but it's the actions that really show who we are. Yeah. So how do you show up? What little things do you do every day? It doesn't have to be a grand gesture like that, but what little things do you do every day that create this kind of, as you would say, the soul in your brand? And for that, I think, like, never underestimate actions, because they are the most powerful thing that you can do for your brand.
Oh, love it. I mean, even that, just from one more thing I picked up from there was just the acts that you described, that can almost start to rewrite stereotypes a little bit, can't it? As you said there, a Premiership footballer, they get put in a box. So I guess, yeah, the stories and the actions, they can craft that as well, can't they, a little bit? We're still talking about being authentic, but with that extra meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one, nobody really expects that from a Premier League footballer. And two, we shared that story with everybody. Like, everybody, like strangers and friends were like, oh, but I did tell you that, the guy down the road, he's really nice. And, when he scores now, we're like, oh, he's one of us. The amazing thing about this is, like, we have the opportunity. It's not like copy sitting on a website that's kind of there and we're not going to go in and change every day. We have the opportunity to kind of create that, the stories around our brand by taking those actions every single day.
Yes. And then that story gets shared. No, I get it. That's just taken me quite a while, Colette, to just link the two. But now I totally get what you're saying, that becomes a story that other people will tell for you.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's pretty powerful. That's almost just marketing on a different level, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, and everybody's a winner, aren't they? people are talking about you in a way, you know, I mean, obviously you can do actions that aren't very positive, but, you know, obviously keep them positive. But yeah, people are talking about you, you know, you're it's like this ripple, isn't it? This like really amazing ripple that it just spreads out because of the actions that you take.
Yeah, and do you know what? Even a bad story ends up getting quite the PR, doesn't it, sometimes?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's and do you know what? That's probably one thing that I'll sort of wrap that up on. It's back to that taking action whichever way, isn't it? You know, is that the one thing to take away from this? It is just take the action, and that is better than not taking any, I guess, isn't it?
I think it's like, where does the action come from? Like, what drives the action? So I always say, what's the motivation? You know, if the motivation is like comes from a good place, like even if you get it wrong, you know I'm in a group where like the woman put out something. So the kind of businesswoman who runs the group, she put out something around Black Lives Matter, and her wording upset a lot of people, and she was really honest, and she came on and she said, look, I've got a lot to learn, I didn't mean this, you know. It provoked a lot of discussion, but it didn't come from a bad place, you know. And actually it was part of a learning journey for her and for a lot of us, actually, that, you know, she got something wrong that maybe you didn't think was wrong, but actually, you know, it helps us all. So that's what I mean about the motivation. Like if you're doing it from a place where you want to serve rather than you're kind of like sell, then I think that's the difference.
And that can make all the difference, can't it, to a brand? I think take the selling out of it and just put you into your brand, I always say, and into your stories. Yeah. Is there anything else you would like to share? Any top tips that we haven't covered yet?
Oh, top tips for storytelling. I mean, you know, number one is be specific. People tend to talk. So, you know, the Google satellites, and you've got the Google satellite view. People tend to talk like when they're kind of up here, they're looking down on the satellite. And I'm always like, no, go down, take the little man, you know, the little yellow man,
Yeah.
get him to walk down the street, go into someone's house. And that's the difference. It's like, make a story real for someone, because the power of a story is not in the listening. So, and people think I'm nuts when I say this. I'm like, oh, what you really want in a story is to make your audience stop listening. And they're like, what? That is the last thing I want. And I'm like, no, you do. What you want is for them to stop listening and start imagining themselves in the story. That is the magic of a story. And when you do that, you know that you've really got their attention, because you're not asking them to listen. As soon as you make them feel something, you know, and they're living that story, they're going to be there with you.
Love that. It's back to the emotions, isn't it? It's all about the emotions. When we strip this right back, just, yeah, it gets us, doesn't it? And especially as women in business, yeah, use the emotions on us. It will work every time.
But on that, I actually think that storytelling, you know, without being sexist here, I think storytelling is, you know, particularly good method for women, because, you know, one of the things that holds women back is like, oh, well, I got this wrong before, I got that wrong before. And actually in a story, you need to have not been perfect, you know, because otherwise the story doesn't work. You need to have learned something. You can't just show up as this perfect person who's got it all and has always had it all sorted.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, you have definitely sold this case to me. I mean, I love sharing stories anyway, but I think I'm going to go off and write some more little stories for my I love it. And Joe, I would love to write a novel. That is just amazing. I mean, have you got any titles that you can throw at us just so we can check them out?
Oh, yeah, I've got, so my first book, which I wrote like ages ago, is called Precious Thing. And then so I've written 4 that have been published. So Precious Thing, The Life I Left Behind, An Act of Silence, and Call Me Alive. They're on my shelves, which is why I'm looking up there. But yeah, I'd like to write a novel too. I'm trying to write my next one and I'm not finding any time. So I'm like,
That's it, isn't it? It's making the time. That could be a whole different podcast episode, I guess.
Yeah, that's definitely for another conversation.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. I've absolutely loved our chat, and it's just, I think it's given me some real insights there to how we can start to use that as part of our brand that you don't necessarily think about. So yeah, I think that's going to help so many people, just to, especially people who maybe do want to start writing more. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh no, pleasure. And you can use stories in whichever way. It's like copy, write, you know, whatever. But yeah, powerful tool when you get it right.
Definitely is. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you for having me.